Hey, welcome to another episode of Spritz of Wisdom. Let's begin, like we do every time, with my sip of the week. These are my highs and lows of the previous week, living here in South Italy. Starting with the highs, although I skipped an episode last week, more on that in a moment. The Saturday before last, we were actually in Palermo and it was beautiful. And we had a weekend there and it was so nice to go back, but to also reflect on how far we've come. And it actually inspired this week's YouTube video, which I published yesterday. So if you've not seen it, go ahead and have a look. I'll link it up here if you are watching this on YouTube. But it was just a beautiful moment because Palermo is an exceptional city. It's completely imperfect. And I've been the first person to tell you that on my channel. But there's something undeniably magical about that place. And it was lovely to be back. So that was a really, really lovely high. Also, the weather. Spring has sprung. Although we're getting a few showers here and there, for the majority of days now, it has been beautiful weather, very mild, and you can feel a difference in the air. The evenings are getting lighter. It's lovely. And I realized how we should listen to the seasons more as humans. You know, like how everybody goes, it's January, let's go with all of our goals and things that we want to achieve in the year. And then you look outside the window and it's tipping down with rain and it's cold and it's dreary and grey. It's difficult, I think, in those moments to have the motivation to do things. But in the spring, there's something about the energy of everything waking up again, everything starting to bloom and flower that makes you kind of want to do the same thing. So I think we should listen more to the seasons. Absolutely. For me, spring is really like the beginning of the year because you get a certain kind of energy that's difficult to kind of muster in the winter, I would say. So that's been a really nice high. Moving into the lows of the past week. Now, this is why I skipped an episode last Tuesday, because you might notice I'm using a different mic if you're watching me on video, because my Rode pod mic stopped working. I have to be honest with you, I was really displeased because I only bought it 5 months ago, but thankfully it's covered under warranty and Rode have been fantastic in terms of their customer care. So now I've just got to wait for them to replace it. So in the meantime, I'm actually using the Rode mic that was for my camera. So there we are. Maybe sometimes we don't need the big technology, but let's see. I'm hoping that it will be second time lucky. And then I decided last week, okay, the show must go on. Even if I don't have my mic, I'm going to use my wireless mic that goes with my Osmo Pocket. And I sat down and I recorded an entire episode, only to later on watch back the footage and realize the video file was corrupted. And then, of course, I understood that we are in the middle of Mercury retrograde. So I have very well and truly been affected by it this time round. But there we are. We are fresh as a daisy this week. And I just gave up last week because I was like, it's not going to happen. I tried on 2 different days. So here we are. We've skipped a week, but we're back. The other low of the past week actually has been, of course, the developing conflict in the Middle East and how it's having like far-reaching implications on the rest of the world. Now, I would say that, of course, it's a worrying situation. It's devastating for the people that are living through it. And I think sometimes we have this like degree of separation because we're not the ones having to take shelter in a bunker, because we're not the ones having the anxiety of, you know, potentially losing loved ones. It kind of feels it's a little bit there. It doesn't really feel like it's impacting us. But the reality is it's a terrible situation. In fact, any kind of conflict is a terrible situation. And I find it so hard to believe that in 2026, we still haven't learned the lessons from the past, right? But it's interesting because I had a comment on one of my shorts. Now, I've been doing this short series, if you've been watching them on YouTube, called Lifting the Lid. And basically, I share real life stories and experiences that I've had here in Italy in nearly 8 years. And I just finished wrapping up the hairdressers edition because trust me, I could write a book about my experiences at the hairdressers here. Anyway, somebody left a comment on one of those shorts saying, and it was an Italian person because I saw the name of the YouTube channel, saying, oh, the world is burning and here's this person talking about hairdressers. And it got me thinking a little bit because I understand at this time you have to be so sensitive about what you're posting because you don't want to come across as being tone deaf. Absolutely. Like, you know, there is real tragedy going on in the world and a hell of a lot of uncertainty combined with that. But at the same token, later that day, I turned on the television. The TV channels were exactly the same. I opened up my YouTube app. Content creators were posting their regular content. I opened up Instagram. It was the same there. And I realized something that can be a bitter pill to swallow and isn't necessarily correct, but life doesn't stop. It carries on. Even the people that are navigating this terrible situation in their countries at the moment are having to try and find a way to continue to navigate and to continue to go on. When you think about all of the global events, like the disasters, the tragedies, the natural disasters, the man-made disasters, the attacks, the wars, the conflicts, everything that has cost lives, caused damage, and devastated countries, the world has never stopped throughout any of that. And whether that's right or wrong is a whole other debate, I think. But essentially, people have to continue to live their lives because the bills don't stop asking to be paid. And especially now, things are going to become a lot more expensive. You know, people still have responsibilities and commitments that don't stop because there is a conflict somewhere in the world. And I feel like sometimes we can have this very idealistic attitude and think, you know, well, these people should now be talking only about the conflict. My channel personally is about life in Italy. If I started diverting and talking about the conflicts around the world, I'm not sure I would still have a YouTube channel because this is not what people signed up for. People signed up and subscribed to my channel for me to talk about the reality of life in Italy. And so, as right or wrong as it may be, the show does go on. And of course, it doesn't mean that I don't reflect on the situation because that's exactly what we're doing in today's podcast episode. But I feel like unless you yourself are drastically changing your life on the back of the news that you've heard around the world, I think it's really hypocritical sometimes to criticize other people who are also just trying to navigate their everyday lives as well. So that was a bit of a low last week, but it's kind of tied into what I wanted to talk about originally because this comment came after I had already decided the topic for this week's podcast. And it is about, is now really the right time to move to Italy? Because it's true, people are going to have judgment at this time. You know, we've got so much global uncertainty, so many hidden consequences and, you know, problems that are going to come on the back of this conflict. And people are going to be like, oh, all you're thinking about is moving to Italy. But I've got a bit of a take on this and it could be controversial or not. It really depends on your viewpoint. But essentially in life, we always have our circle of influence. I've spoken about this before in other podcast episodes and also over on my main YouTube channel. But essentially, we have aspects of our life that are within our control. And then we have aspects of our life that we have zero to little control over. Any kind of global event, any kind of conflict, war, problem that affects large numbers of people is generally something that we have zero control over. And so you have to ask yourself this question: are you going to let your life be dictated by circumstances that you cannot control? Or are you going to look at what is within your circle of influence, what is within your control, and work with that instead? Now, I do think, of course, if you are planning to move to Italy, especially with everything that's going on in the world right now, that yeah, you do have to perhaps think a lot more carefully than you may have thought about it before, because there are going to be implications here. You know, the cost of fuel has already really started to increase. Some motorway service stations are reporting that it's like €2 a litre. But I will say to you that Italy are doing their best to try to curb the impact on citizens and residents here. Essentially, what has been happening up to now is the Italian government have been really regulating the prices at petrol pumps. They have been checking to make sure that companies are not speculating and therefore increasing the cost for motorists unnecessarily so. And what I read just the other day is that they are considering waiving the taxes, or at least reducing the taxes that they impose at the petrol pump, to try to mitigate the higher cost for motorists. Now, whether or not this happens is not confirmed yet, but of course, things are going to start to increase a lot. You know, it's not just the cost of fuel. You've got to think about the impact it's going to have on businesses. I'm already having conversations with people and they're saying, you know, the cost of things are really starting to increase already. Like, you know, they're worried about how they're going to continue their business because some of the countries they do business with are very close to the affected areas where this whole conflict is happening. And so there are far-reaching implications, not just here in Italy, but all around the world. And so I do think that you do have to be perhaps a lot more mindful than you may have been before. I'm not saying it's not impossible. In fact, I would say that you shouldn't hold your dreams off for things that you have no influence over. But I will say that you do have to have more of a plan B and maybe even a C and a D than you may have had before, You do have to have a solid plan for your finances when you're here. You do have to understand what you're going to be doing here. You can't move here on a win and a prayer. And I've never ever said that you should, but even more so now you can't, because everything is really, really uncertain in this period. I will say though, that don't allow yourself to be shamed into wanting to follow your dreams in this time. It's very, very easy sometimes to let other people who perhaps have let world events get to them, consume them, make them paralyzed, stop you from doing the things that you want to do. You have to protect your energy in this time, absolutely. If you've got this big audacious dream of moving to Italy and all you're watching at the moment on the news is about this conflict in the Middle East and all the global uncertainty that comes with it, then of course you're going to start to become very negative and despondent, and you may even decide that now is not the right moment. I'm very careful about the amount of news that I consume. In fact, I consume enough news to educate myself, but I don't consume enough to fall down into that trap of kind of negativity and sensationalism that the media are very, very, very notorious for. It's very rare, I think, for the media to kind of publicize and promote positive stories. A lot of the news nowadays, regardless of global conflict, is negative. And so I feel like you have to be really, really mindful of what you're consuming and also the sources of information. There is so much fake news kind of bouncing around on the internet at the moment, and especially so on like social media. And so you have to understand what sources of information you are prepared to listen to and what you're not. And just limit the amount of time that you spend consuming kind of news reports and stories about what's going on in the world. Because yes, you need to be educated and you need to kind of be aware of what's going on, because potentially, you know, there could be implications for you as well. But I don't think that you should be also consumed that you lose track of what it is that you really, really want to do. And I guess for my chin this week is this: there are going to be lots of people that tell you that now is not the right time to move to Italy. So many people that are going to try to dissuade you for both good and bad intentions. People that are going to shame you into silence because they think that you should be focusing on other things instead of something like moving to Italy. But just remember, you must do what's right for you. Unfortunately, and it's such a sad thing to say, this kind of situation is never, ever going to stop. You know, if it's not now, in 10 years, there'll be another issue. In 20 years, like, we never learn from our mistakes as a world, as a culture, as a human race. And so you have to decide what steps you want to take in your life and the things that are important for you, because the world is not going to change for you, but you can change within the world. I will see you in the next episode.